The sabotaging the American university has not only led to higher literacy, but also higher anxiety, and the decimation of the Western value system in this country. Michigan State University is not apart from this, and I will highlight 3 cases in this last week that demonstrate it. This is Undeniable with Surya Kelly. Here I'll highlight news and what was reported, things that weren't reported, and further information, indoctrination, and leftist bias at Michigan State University. Before I forget, we have several open positions available on the Morning Watch staff. And as usual, contributor spots are also open and they get $15 per article. So as seen on this very obvious flyer here, we have executive editor, we also have assistant positions, website manager positions, and other positions that are available and that we're looking to fill. Please reach out on Facebook to us, message us, or also message us through the website. Also, make sure you comment below on this video. I make several claims here in this video that may seem provoking or that you may not agree with, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. So an outline, kind of a backstory to what I'm discussing, how the whole sabotaging the American university has taken place and how it's formulated. So within Reagan's excellence on education and their statement that they came out with after this whole commission went through, where essentially the Reagan administration looked at where is the American education standing, how is it doing, how is it performing, and they said, if an unfriendly foreign power had attempted to impose on America the mediocre educational performance that exists today, we might well have viewed it as an act of war. So this wasn't by some far-right extremist group or anything. This is by the Reagan administration, right after the commission released a report. And this is within David Kuplian's book, The Marketing of Evil, How Radicals, Elitists, and Pseudo-Experts Sells Corruption Disguised as Freedom. I definitely recommend the book. It's a fantastic read. It will surely trigger every leftist you know. And I will be referencing throughout this first part of the video his section starting on page 149, How Radicals Have Hijacked America's Educational System. So first, to begin with, we've already talked about how it was described as the act of war, what's happening to their education system. This is back in 1983. So this is over 20 years ago, almost 30 now. So just some crazy cases that kind of point out where this lunacy has led us to, and be right from the book. Here's an example. A Louisiana high school student was expelled for 1 year because she had an Advil pills in her purse. She carried the over-the-counter medicine because of frequent headaches, but the Bossier Parish School District maintained it was following a state law barring drugs on campus. And I will point out that this is at the same time where universities and schools are pushing for free and accessible abortions and abortion pills on campus. Another example, in Florida, a female high school sophomore with good academic record, no disciplinary problems, was suspended for possession of a nail clipper. She lent it to a friend who used it, and there happened to be, there was alleged there was a knife blade on it. So we can't have that because no weapons, which goes to another example, just another last crazy example of where this, leftism, where this hijacking of the American system has led us. 3 boys were suspended from Bemis Elementary School in Spokane, Washington, for bringing to school miniature toy guns with G.I. Joe action figures. The toys were about 1 to 3 inches, but the school said it violates its zero tolerance policy against weapons. So there's some crazy consequences, and just going all the way back, looking at the founding statement of Harvard. What was the mission of Harvard founded on? It will surprise you. So here's a part from the Rules and Precepts of 1642. Let every student be plainly instructed and earnestly pressed to consider well the main end of his life and studies is to know God and Jesus Christ, which is eternal life, John 17:3, and therefore to lay Christ in the bottom as the only foundation of all sound knowledge and learning. And seeing the Lord only giveth wisdom, let every one seriously set himself by prayer in secret to seek it from him. Proverbs 2 and 3. So this is one of the founding statements of Harvard, which obviously now is facing problems with discriminating against Asians and doing racial quotas at the university, and it has fallen under this same dialogue where the system has been hijacked by leftism. And so the motives and the revolutionaries of this movement has roots back in the 1920s. John Dewey, all these other people. So in the first decades of the 20th century, a small group, soon to be very famous academics such as John Dewey, Edward Thorndike, um, Stanley Hall, and all these other people, they went together. They worked with Carnegie's and Rockefellers, and decided to use government education, the formulation of a government system that is overseen, that directs education, as a will to serve the business of a political state, as it had been done before, allegedly in Prussia. And these also figures, if you've heard of the Frankfurt School, is corporate with that, which is an active attempt with collectivist, leftist, socialistic, ideologies coming together, how to, use the state to serve their goods, to collectivize society. So the principal motivation for this revolution in family community seems to surface on greed, but appeared concealed in philosophical visions, approaching actually to religious extremism. And the whole movement was to bring the population to conformity, to bring them to submission, so they might be regarded as a human resource, a workforce. We call it the American workforce, which was not something you would call, the Americans who worked in 1800s or late 1700s. That just, workforce is a relatively new term. It's a very conformist, general term that kind of assembles, this is the workforce, these are the people, there's a working class. And so these were people like no more, Thomas Edison's, no more Benjamin Franklin's, because if you're in the workforce, you're not inventing, you're not being creative, you're just going to work 8 to 5 or more for 6-7 days, for 5-6 days a week, and that's what you're seen as. And so, kind of, a summary, just a whole paraphrase this, as Kuplian mentions in his book on page 161. In other words, the traditional school promoted individualism, which Dewey and other progressives equated with selfishness. What were needed were schools that promoted the collectivist spirit of socialism. And so, obviously, just to mention real quick, the first thing that sacrificed in this system, which sprouted, began to be a theory and a propagation in the 1920s, which, led to actual implementation, especially after World War II, with the workforce coming back home. The greatest generation put in there was this new system, and immediately the first consequence, especially from taking prayer and all this stuff out of schools, was literacy. And we all know that literacy took a huge hit for America. And so how would they do these? What tactics would someone use to, bring in a program like this, to bring in, sister programs of Common Core, or sister, things of sex education in schools, things that, reserved typically to the family, were brought into schools. And if not even, the 20-30 years ago, the sex ed program to what it has become now is very different. But it has these same roots, these 3 tactics that, that can be labeled that they use. Desensitization, which is, going from, we should talk about sex in schools. Children should know, how to be safe. We coined the term safe sex, which is another desensitization to, the other effects of just casual sex with anyone who gives consent. That's discussed further on several other, that's a whole other topic. But desensitizing, going from, we should just do this to, leading it progressively down the road. Facilitization, which is essentially, they have the opportunity to bring these stuff in, and so it's sitting kids in classroom and actively just having them go through these ideologies. And I'll go talk about something that happened at MSU further in this video, where they had a bias workshop in a Fisheries and Wildlife class. So that's an active facilitization of a ideology where students are having to look at their biases, look at what's wrong with them, forgive themselves of what the instructors actually said, and go from there. So it's an actively bringing in these ideologies, not just, having them somehow be, sensitized to them outside, coming in, or for the last one, which is uninformed intentional consequences. So these are, students are, brought under these ideologies, whether at home, at school, political life, and they're not informed of the actual consequences of these things. So, it's one thing to be, pro environmentalism. I think if you ask anyone if we should care and take good care of the earth, yes. But it's one thing to go from there, and saying we must take care of the earth, carbon tax this. We need more space for trees. We need less space for humans. That can bring down consequences, which are intentional, not to the person that might not intentionally know them, but they are intentional consequences of this ideology to, have less people, to have higher, use of abortion, to have, to curtail, the unfit, as eugenics sought to do in the 1800s and early 1900s. Fortunately, that has in some ways declined, or at least, or more unfortunately, transformed in its form to, the high problems of sex trafficking and abortion in this country now. And so 3 cases that happened at MSU in this last week that highlight, these desensitization tactics, this facilitization tactics, and also the uninformed intentional consequences, which all breach from, what discussed further, this backstory, stemming from Reagan's statement calling this an act of war. That began in the 1920s and has progressed further, as Cooper discussed in his books. 3 cases that I'll underline was a rally for undocumented students at the Hanna Administration Building last Friday. The next event is a climate strike panel held at the James Madison College, the political college at the university, where professors and student groups, many of these students from student groups related to the environment, climate, etc., came together to discuss climate. And then the last one was a bias training workshop in a fisheries and wildlife class, which took the whole span of the time. So to begin with the rally for undocumented students, this was, and obviously all these are right on the Morning Watch website. You can go there, view it. There's more that in these articles than I can discuss in my limited time here. Fortunately, we got a lot of videos from the rally for undocumented students, so definitely watch those. It gives us, watch the raw footage. We want you to see what actually happened, not just what we were able to report or what I'm telling you now. And so they were demanding changes for the university, which number 1 was a sanctuary campus. Number 2, also a resource center for undocumented students and a website they can use, etc., etc. And several videos of them, chanting, no ban, no wall, America is home to all. They also talked about, dreamers. They talked about undocumented people. And so really going after desensitization. If we think about the words, dreamer and undocumented people and America home for all, those I would label those as desensitization. For one, I was at a conference a while ago, and undocumented, most people and students, even if they're students here at the university, have some sort of documentation. It is very hard to be in the 21st century without any, sort of name, birth certificate, tax thing, even if from a different country. Someone's got your name written down on a piece of paper. You're licensed with, have a license, fishing license or something. Or you did this one time at this park. They have your name, number, all this stuff down. Very few people are actually undocumented. And if we can somehow estimate the number of undocumented people that means we have some metrics, or there's some availability there. So that's also a very easy term to use, because if they're undocumented, it seems like they're foreign, they're lost, we don't know, but we do know. We know a lot. ICE and the Border Protection know a lot about these people. They're not just aimlessly in this country. Many of them hold jobs. Many of them are active in this university. Obviously, what this rally was about, undocumented students. So it's a way to paint, entire populace, entire group of people as, more foreign, not as, instilled in the society. And that can, lead to, further demands, such as the sanctuary campus. Dreamers. Trump did a good, he stated it well in his State of the Union. We're all dreamers. We're dreamers too. Americans are dreamers. I mean, the American dream, literally. So I'm not saying that, people that are, not citizens or illegal immigrants that come here, that they don't have dreams or aspirations of their own. I mean, everyone should and everyone can. But to use the word dreamers, paints a more poetic vision, and it kind of desensitizes, an illegal immigrant is a dreamer. What if that illegal immigrant is also, part of a gang and has, helped, kill, well, help murder hundreds of people, or even less, just one. So just because using the word dreamer can paint a different picture doesn't take away from what actually might be true. Um, and also, America's home to all. They chanted this several times during the rally. But is America home to all? We certainly, the left certainly doesn't want racists here. The left certainly, many of them don't want, Trump supporters here. Many of them don't want even Trump here. Many of them want to leave because Trump's here. So it's not, clearly they don't agree with that themselves. Obviously, in the mission, the whole, like, yes, we want America to be a home for all, but there's some things that you either have to do to get in here or have to ascribe to. You can't. We don't want mass murderers. We don't want sex traffickers, as they are in the country, but they're not home to what we believe is a nation that we should uphold. Yes, we have hundreds and hundreds of sex traffickers in this country. It is horrible, but we wouldn't say that we're all home here. They're a negative and foreign part of this country that we want to eradicate and reduce. So America is not home to all. We're not home to terrorists. We don't want to be a home to terrorists. We don't want to be a home to sex traffickers. We don't want to be a home to, other criminals, or any criminals in a sense. That's why we have laws against that. Moving on, and make sure you catch up on those videos and comment on this video below. And so the Climate Strike panel, this, first one was facilitization. They facilitized this event. It was an active event where they could propagate certain ideology. And this is in professors were there. This was in a college. Student groups were there. And so they were, and they also discussed that by any means necessary to have, MSU, take up more seriously the climate debate and to take more serious action. So by any means necessary is really like an active call to, like, they must do this, they must facilitate this. And furthermore, there are uninformed intentional consequences. So obviously with the climate debate, there is a lot of this, because on one hand you can say save our earth, fight for our future, and there's a great picture on this article heading that there's several signs here. There is no planet B. Mother Earth is important. It's not just all about farting cows. Make Earth great again. All these messages, which can sound very good, and most people can agree with helping Earth or helping keep Earth well. We have to remember there are an unintentional consequence. So first consequence is it is first by stating any means necessary at this event, at which they did, but also talking about we need to something radical needs to happen, as was stated by a James Madison College professor here. They said something like a civic uprising coming from we need to have less meat. We need to have more vegan and plant-based stuff. We need to have more trees, less people, more space for animals. And so these they intentionally know what's going on, like the people spreading these, but the people receiving them can receive or give unintentional consequences generally. So these students there that are all riled up, they might not honestly think that they want to have, they might think, yeah, less people on this might be good, but then you look at, what they're supporting, high, free access to abortion, abortion in other countries. Trump recently, stopped that. He said, we were not funding abortions in other countries, cut that funding, and the liberals are losing their minds. Abortion in other countries, and this country too, is being used very effectively to, have less people, millions of American citizens, to be American citizens, to be born, are gone. They're not here. They never were given the opportunity to be born. And so these are unintentional consequences. When we look at the abortion, we look at, all these things about having less people, and that rhetoric that comes from, some are very honest about it, some are not. And the further, they really demanded, especially targeting MSU's fossil fuel funding and investments they wanted that gone. Get that out of there. So what are the consequences of that? Obviously, we're in northern Michigan. We have homes that need to keep warm in winter. We have cars to power. The whole school needs to be powered. And so you can't just, it's stupid. Like, I also created a category for just this article, besides, 3 texts I was describing, just called, besides the other ones, just called just stupid. It's just stupid, to have, to claim that we don't need fossil fuels or we shouldn't have all investment. That's just stupid. And also, a later part, some student was remarking, MSU, the student government, needs to act, and they were claiming that their billions of funding can be used. So, very uninformed. ASMSU owns only $2.4 million that they can only actually use in the budget for the General Assembly, less than half of that. So it's just very, we don't have, not the brightest minds at that meeting. And going into this last event, which is a very heavily, facilitized event, this bias training in Fisheries and Wildlife Club Fisheries and Wildlife class, which is over about 2 hours long. They shared, and right on the article, the cover photo is this oppression wheel they showed. Big orange wheel of oppression and change. And at this event, they asked students to forgive themselves of these biases. They facilitized, handed out students worksheets, which is a heavy facilitation of this ideology, handed them out, had terms come up on the projector right in front of class, different terms like lawyer, black woman, woman that stay at home, Republican, Democrat. They're like, hey, write down first things that come up to your mind, your unconscious bias, which they said propagated from your instinctual mind, which that goes into a different topic of, they're obviously noticing that they need to reform you somehow, because of your instinctual mind, it must be reformed into, more evolved state of being, which has, unintentional consequences. And also students, after writing things down, which who knows what the worst thing was or what they would call the worst thing, they were encouraged to rip them up. Or like, hey, you might write some horrible things down, so let's all, I think there's a direct quote in here. Yes, forgive yourself ahead of time. We can ritualistically rip them all up together. This was said by Katusha Galitzin from the College of Agriculture Diversity Office. And furthermore, they said the responses might make you cringe and it might make you feel bad about yourself. And then further down this wheel, this big oppression wheel, they had, several terms. They talked about values, beliefs, feelings, rules, policies, beauty, truth, actions, and behaviors. And culturally, what they labeled on culture section of this wheel, which was the outermost ring, they had it labeled as truth. And they described truth as what's considered right and normal, and that was both in quotations. Which, this is another, unintentional consequence, which is, relativizing truth. If truth is relative, that, I don't even go into that. That's pretty obvious. If truth is relative, then you can't say, a murderer is wrong, or, a murderer is just as right in a situation as, the neighbor who helps out a widow. Because now it's relative. It's relative to the situation. It depends on the effect and, circumstantial evidence and surroundings. So this is very, very, a very, great environment for, leftist theories, leftist propagation of things that have happened for our school system since the 1920s by leading figures, progressives such as John Dewey, who was part of the Department of Education at one point, and it definitely, rereading again, Reagan's statement, just calling, if a foreign power had attempted to oppose on America the mediocre educational performance that exists today, this is 1983, we might as well call an act of war. So that's what this is. They're using, these three tactics: desensitization, facilitization, and also the uninformed intentional consequences. These are three tactics that fall right into the same narrative of what has happened throughout this country since about the 1920s, which very surfaced in the 1960s. We saw, with the sexual revolution, with all those movements that propagated up and what they've done, the damage they've done now. And you look at not just literacy in this country, but the number of the high rise of anxiety among students, especially, and also just the, even beyond students in college. We look further, people in their 40s or 50s or 60s are facing these consequences too. And they'll continue as long as these universities are like this. So there's undeniably these programs at MSU, these last three in this last week, undeniably hurt students by desensitization, by later consequences, and they're facilitized. Why is MSU spending 2 hours to talk to students about, their unconscious bias, which they somehow can know, but even though it's unconscious, whatever. So they're talking to them about that and forgiving themselves of their biases, but not spending 2 hours to talk about, how to be financially independent, how to do tax form, or how to have a strong marriage. Not spending time on that, but they have time to talk about unconscious bias, which you can know even though it's unconscious. So this has been Surrey Kelly with The Morning Watch on the Undeniable series. Subscribe below to the Morning Watch channel and also to our website, and also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to stay up to date with the dominant and unwelcoming leftist culture at Michigan State University. Thank you.